What's up again, everybody? For those that don't know, the UK Games Expo was this past weekend, and WizKids had some new product on display there. More specifically, they were showing off the Kree Invasion Team Pack and the Harley Quinn Team Pack. And luckily for us, they let BritRoller6 take those packs and open them both up and show the contents to the community through spoiler images. So I asked for the high-res versions of those images. I cut them out and I made them look and shaped like cards so that they're easier to see and read and experience, and then I threw them on Facebook in an album, and now we're going to look at each one of them in video form and talk about how good or bad they are. Do note this is the entire contents of this Harley Quinn team pack, and so at the end I'm also going to give my general idea about the set and whether or not you should pick up one or two of these team packs, because if you want to run max dice on some of these cards, then you need to buy two of them because you only get 2 dice per card within the team pack. Okay, so let's start with one of my favorite characters from this team pack. This is Batman. The first one is Batman Plays Too Rough. It's a 5-cost fist character with the Justice League affiliation, a 144-255-375 stat line, and his ability reads, Batman gets +1/+1 for each sidekick character die in the field zone, and that counts both players, and if your opponent has any active villain character dice, Batman gains Overcrush. So the stat line by itself is good for a 5-drop minus the 3 fielding cost on top. So let's attempt to imagine this on any random team with no sidekick synergy whatsoever and evaluate the power level of the ability. If we have something like 2 total sidekicks in the field, then you're looking at a bottom side 6/6 and a top side 9/7. If both you and your opponent each have 2 sidekicks, which is much more like an average game, then you're looking at a 4/4 buff for Batman. That's an 8/8 on bottom and an 11/9 on top. That's not even considering the possibilities of sidekick synergies like Wong and Professor X Global. Now, if we just stopped there, this might seem good in casual play, but the fact that Batman gives himself Overcrush if your opponent has a villain is insane. Notable villains that make the cut on semi-competitive teams are Shriek, Scarlet Witch, Nobby, Blob, Malekith, and we can expect to see some Kree stuff climb into that category as well. So the likelihood that Batman gives himself Overcrush is decently high. This card is insane for a 5-drop, and honestly pretty insane in general. So chalk me up as a fan and I say this sees some semi-competitive play. The next version of Batman strikes terror into criminal hearts. It's also a 5-drop with the same affiliation. This ability reads, while Batman is active, while your sidekick character dice are attacking, they get +2 attack. So it's hard to go from the power level of that first card and not be disappointed with the rest of the cards in the set, but this Batman is not bad. The biggest downside is that your sidekicks can be pinged out before they attack, as well as during the globals portion of the attack step, but a bunch of 3 attack characters that you can get via powerful globals like PXG is still good. I also look at allies like the 3-drop Wong that can get the Batman buff, as well as giving a 1/1 buff to your additional sidekicks, and see a nice little aggro team unrelated to Jubilee forming. I think this one sees some casual play as well. The final Batman is called Warring on All Criminals, again a 5-drop Justice League affiliated character. Its ability reads, if you control 2 or more sidekick character dice, you may field Batman for free. So we saved the most underwhelming for last, and that's going to be a trend with this video. I did not plan that out, but that's kind of how it worked out. Not having to pay 3 for a 7/5 is great, but it's hard to pass up on the other 2 cards just for this one. I will take the time to note that the Justice League affiliation may be an important factor in these Batman variants, as we do know that a Justice Campaign box is in the works, so if we get some good Justice League synergies from that, then we may need to reevaluate these cards. Alright, the next character we're going to look at is Catwoman. The first Catwoman, Irina Dubrovna, is a 4-cost fist character villain with an 021-122-233 stat line. She reads, when fielded, prep a die from your bag. If the prepped die is a villain character die, prep a second die from your bag. So at worst, we're paying 4 to get this, 2 to field it on its level 3 side, and then we get to prep like a sidekick die. That's horrible. At best, you pay 4 to buy this, 0 to field it on its level 1 side, prep a villain die, which leads to prepping another die, and hopefully using a second proc of the effect because we planned ahead, bought Rare Absorbing Man that we put on the team to go with this, and got it active before fielding Catwoman, at which point we draw another villain and prep a total of 4 dice. That's like the best you could possibly do with this card, and and that equates to a total of 7 energy in purchases, not counting the villains that we would have already had to purchase to draw on Catwoman's ability, a few energy to field our characters, a whole lot of lining things up, and luck of the draw. Basically what I'm saying is this card is bad. Moving on. The next Catwoman is a 4 cost as well, same stat line, same villain affiliation. This one's got a wall of text. It says, when fielded, you may re-roll an active sidekick character die that you control. If it rolls an energy faced, you may send that die to the used pile to KO target opposing character die with an energy type that matches the energy type that you rolled. If you rolled a question mark face, then you can send it to the used pile to KO any target opposing character die instead. And then it also adds this text that says a re-rolled character die face remains in the field zone. So if you re-roll a sidekick, it just goes right back in the field zone. And an energy face that is not sent to the used moves to the reserve pool, which is a little bit interesting. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Basically, when we field our terribly understated 4-drop, we roll a sidekick. Assuming it's an actual sidekick and not like an ally or something, then we have like a 5 and 6 chance to roll an energy and maybe KO something. We also have a 1 in 6 chance to KO anything we want, and a 1 in 6 chance that that sidekick just goes right back to the field where we pulled it from. But even if we roll energy, that symbol may not match the energy type of a character in our opponent's field. And if not, that sidekick that rolled energy now moves to our reserve pool, and we can use it to buy or field stuff like normal. So that's nice at least. The best thing we can possibly hope for is that if we field Catwoman and KO something by removing one of our sidekicks, that we could also do this again with Absorbing Man out or something, but this is just too inconsistent and not worth it. The final Catwoman is a 3-cost fist character with that same affiliation and stat line. It says when fielded, if you have an active non-Catwoman villain character die, spin this Catwoman die up 1 level. Okay, so a 3-drop now that might help the stat line, and we get this ability. So I could maybe have a 3-3 if I have 1 villain in the field. In fact, I'm guaranteed the 3-3 side if I combine this with Absorbing Man. Woohoo! Still, that's not good. All of these are not good. Sorry, Catwoman. Moving on, we have Deadshot, and Deadshot only has 2 variants because they used 3 of these slots within this team pack to include some basic actions. So the first of the 2 Deadshots we have is Death Doesn't Scare Me. He's a 4-cost bolt character with the villain affiliation, an 031-141 to 5-2 stat line, and he says when Deadshot is KO'd, deal 1 damage to all opposing character dice. So his ability works well with his low defensive stat line, which is something of note, but we've seen this sort of ability before on Banshee with a similar stat line and slightly worse fielding costs, except Banshee's was a when fielded, which is generally easier to synergize with and use, but maybe the lowered fielding cost makes this one more usable than Banshee. I don't really think it helps his chances into making the cut into the meta, but there's a possibility of this one combining nicely with one of the Poison Ivies that we'll talk about later, so maybe this one works a little better than Banshee, maybe it doesn't, who knows. At the very least, it has that villain synergy. The second Deadshot is nice shooting. It's also a 4-cost bolt character, same stat line and affiliation. He says when Deadshot attacks, if you have 2 or more bolt energy in your reserve pool, deal 3 damage to target character die. This seems like a decent ability in a limited format like Draft, but I don't see much usefulness in Constructed. Granted, the 3 damage dealt deals with a bunch of low defense win cons and control pieces like Shriek or Jubilee or Yanti or Boom Boom, that sort of thing. But needing the bolts combined with the low defensive stats, leaving him likely to be KO'd before he attacks, makes him a little bit too unreliable in a competitive or even really semi-competitive play. So there are some merits to running this card because of the things I just mentioned, but I just don't see it quite getting there. Okay, on to Harley Quinn. This is Harley Quinn Crazy Crusader as the first one, a 4-cost mask character with that villain affiliation, an 022-133-144 stat line, and her ability reads, while Harley Quinn is active, when you field a non-Harley Quinn villain character die, each Harley Quinn character die you control gains +2 attack and +2 defense. So when evaluating this card, and cards in general, I like to think, how do I maximize the ability or natural synergies on the card itself? So let's do that with this one. How do we maximize the villain fielding portion to get a ton of buffs on this card? Well, we want to put it on a team that can field a bunch of villains. So let's put it on the Malekith sidekick team, as each sidekick we field is a villain and we can use PXG to more consistently field sidekicks when we need to. With this card in the field and in that setup, we can expect on average 2 to 3 villain fields when we need it, giving us a 4-4 or a 6-6 buff on Harley here. That is a bottom side 6-6 or 8-8 and a top side 8-8 or 10-10. Oh, and this is a possible turn 1 purchase. Picture that. alongside the 3-drop captain that gets buffed by the number of villains in the field, and you can see why this could be dangerous. Your opponent can't control all of the threats that you pose, and even if they remove Malekith, you still have decent villain synergies that can provide some buffs and threats going forward. I see this one making a semi-competitive list or two. The next Harley Quinn is Gotham State Graduate, another 4-cost mask character villain, same stat line. This one says when Harley Quinn is KO'd, reroll all active character dice and KO any that roll energy faces. So I don't really even know how best to approach this. If you KO her, you could wipe everybody's board and I guess trigger a bunch of your when KO'd effects. If you trigger the ability with Absorbing Man out, you'd reroll the board twice, assuming that Absorbing Man survives the first reroll. There's like this whole can of worms that opens up with this card and Absorbing Man triggering a bunch of when KO'd abilities, and I'm not quite sold that it's good, but in the right situations, this could do wonders. Plus, at the very least, if you KO this on your opponent's turn, then you get to reroll all of your stuff on your turn and counter swing into a potentially open board. So at the very least, it's good in that sense. So yeah, I'd go with this card is pretty good for KO teams and pretty good in general. And finally, worst for last, this is Harley Quinn Harlequin, and she says when fielded, if the Joker is active, prep a die from your bag. So this is the least powerful time, so at best we trigger this with Absorbing Man and Joker in the field and prep 2 dice. That's only good if there's like a good Joker around, and we're about to look at them and they're not very good, so moving on. On to Harley's Hyena. The first one is subtitled Bud and Lou. It's a 3-cost shield character with an 013-124-134 stat line that says when Harley's Hyena attacks, both players draw a die. The player or players who draw the die with the lowest purchase cost take 2 damage. Then return those dice to their bags. Sidekicks have a purchase cost of 0, of course, and repeat this for each Harley's Hyena die that attacks. Alright, so can we reliably fix our bag to contain something bigger than a sidekick? Sort of, yeah, we could do that. Can we control our opponent's bag to have something of lower purchase cost than our dice consistently? Not really. So this kind of boils down to a coin flippy win attacks ability, and that doesn't really cut it in competitive. It does remind me of like a Sarina ability, as it's a win attacks, someone takes 2, but if that someone is you and you're attacking with a 1-3, then you're just sad. This card isn't very good if you miss. Harley's Hyena Mama's Baby is also a 3-cost shield character, and this one says when Harley's Hyena attacks, both players draw a die. If the die you draw has a higher purchase cost, then this Harley's Hyena die gets +3 attack and return that die to your bag. If not, place the die in your used pile. So if you lose, yours goes to used. Your opponent always places their die they drew in the used pile. Okay, so now here's a coin flip ability I can get behind. Obviously, if we win, we've burned one of their dice into the used and gotten like +3 attack on our attacker, and ours just goes back to the bag. But even if we lose, we've burned a low cost die into our used and out of our bag and burned a higher cost die of theirs into their used. That's good enough to invest multiple 3-drops into. I'd like to see this on a Mimi control team, like a Triceratops Black Cat team that doesn't allow your opponent to field anything except on level 2, and then you kind of throw this in there as well, and the things that they can't field go to their used and back into their bag, and then you make them pull them out of their bag to win the coin flip, or for them winning the coin flip, and then it burns to used no matter what. So it always just keeps cycling and nothing really gets rolled on their end. That would be really cool. I think this card has some potential. Alright, the last Harley's Hyena is also a 3-drop. This is Screwball Scavenger, and it says while Harley's Hyena is active at the start of your turn, both players draw a die. Place the die with the highest purchase cost into its owner's prep area, and place the other die in its owner's used pile. If both dice have an equal purchase cost, then place both in their owner's used piles. So the nice thing about winning this coin flip is that the die that you prep will get rolled during your clear and draw step because this happens at the beginning of your turn. If you end up losing, then at best you've moved a sidekick into your used, thinning your bag, and at worst you've moved like a win condition to used and prep a strong die for your opponent. So the bad end of this is really bad, and the good end of this is pretty good. In my mind, I see just as much risk as I do reward, but if bag control can be perfected through play or through new cards that help with it, then I could see this being interesting. As it stands though, I would not play this, and I don't see it making a lot of cuts within the meta. Alright, on to the Poison Ivy cards. The first one is Budding Interest. She is a 4-cost mask villain with an 012-024-136 stat line, and she says while Poison Ivy is active, When an opposing non-villain character die is KO'd, its owner loses 1 life. Holy WinCon Batman, this looks like a really fun card to play around with. It's important to note that this is losing life, not taking damage, so if any cards reference your opponent taking damage, this will not trigger it. That being said, this does get around the uncommon Thor, which feels like a step away from being good. This should be a nice casual win condition with something like super rare staff or uncommon danger room and a board wipe like the Deadshot that we talked about earlier. So I see this seeing some play. The next Poison Ivy is Flower Child. She is also a 4-cost mask villain. This one says, while Poison Ivy is active, when you field a villain character die, deal 1 damage to target opponent. So this plays out like a 4-cost Jubilee with villains, which makes it an order of magnitude less powerful. Still, it might be worth the investment if you could even use both on the same team, like Jubilee and Poison Ivy on the same team. If you consider that Malekith's sidekick team as both a sidekick and a villain team, then you could conceivably deal 2 damage each time you field a sidekick if you have Poison Ivy, Jubilee, and Malekith all in the field at the same time, and that could be interesting. I think this has enough potential going forward to make some strong casual teams as both a win con and another threat on your team. And the last Poison Ivy is just subtitled Red. She is a 3-cost mask character, and she says when Poison Ivy blocks or is blocked by a non-villain character die, she gains Deadly until the end of the turn. Prevent all damage dealt to Poison Ivy by non-villain character dice. Now here is a meta card. This is a blocker that cannot get removed via physical damage by just about anything in the current meta. All of the teams that rely on physical damage rely on that damage coming from a non-villain character. Fix-It, Gold Dragon, Captain America, Batiri Battlestack are all non-villain characters, meaning that this is a 3-drop 3/6 that can block each of them and never receive damage. No more overcrushing Fix-Its killing you on turn 4 or 5 with this card. Very powerful and will be a meta card if physical damage continues to be a thing. Okay, on to what is in my mind a very underwhelming character. We have Power Girl. The first one is Kara, or is it Kara Zor-El? I think it's Kara. Anyway, she's a 5-cost bolt character with the Superman affiliation, the Superman family affiliation, I think it's referred to. A 144, 155, 266 stat line. She has a wall of text that says, while Power Girl is active, if you control at least one active villain character at the end of your main step, roll an unpurchased basic action die, and if it rolls an energy face, Power Girl cannot attack, and if it rolls an action face, Power Girl gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn, and then return that unpurchased basic action to its card. The biggest downside of missing the roll on the action die is not being able to attack when you have lethal, but the upside of a potential 8/8/4/5 is not bad. All that being said, it's a 5-drop that only affects its own stat line with its ability, and that is inherently very weak. This won't see play. The other Power Girl is a 6-cost Kryptonian. When fielded, gain 1 life for each opposing non-sidekick character die. So against most teams, this is like a when fielded heal for 2, as most teams don't really fill their board with non-sidekick characters. Against something like a Batiri Battlestack or even Yanti Boom Boom to a certain degree, this could be like a when fielded heal for 5, which is very cool, but it's on a 6-drop, so it won't see play. And rounding out the characters, we have the Joker. This one is the 4-cost Laughing Boy. Villain affiliation with a 114, 125, 236 stat line, the classic Joker stat line. He says, when fielded, if Harley Quinn is active, prep a die from your bag. So this is like a mirror of the Harley Quinn Harlequin ability, and that one's bad, so you get the idea. The Joker, Mr. J, is a 5-cost villain with that same stat line. He says, when fielded, choose an energy type, replacing all previous choices, and while the Joker is active, when an opponent fields a character die of that energy type, deal 1 damage to that opponent. So mono energy teams were like huge when Lantern Ring was around, but now that it's rotated out, there's no real reason to build a mono energy team as of right now. But funnily enough, most teams in the semi-competitive scene generally have a single energy type's worth of characters, or at most like 2 energy types to key off of. Boom Boom Yanti is generally all bolts. Fix-It Gold Dragon is generally all fists. Villain Control is bolt, fist, shield, so that mixes it up a little bit. That makes this card pretty good for the meta. Unfortunately, it's for 5, and it doesn't actually control your opponent's play like you would think at the start of reading the ability. You start reading this ability and you're like, oh, this is like the old school Joker. I'm going to do some control-y things with it. Instead, it just pings them for damage. In a highly competitive meta, this probably wouldn't even hit the board before the game ended, so the effect won't let it cut its way into the meta in those scenes. Perhaps in like a semi-competitive scene, it'll have a spot similar to like Tabaxi Rogue. It's just more expensive, so maybe not. Okay, the last 3 cards we have are all basic actions. The first one is a reprint of Relaxing. Relaxing is a 4-cost basic action that says draw a die and roll it. Name a die. Draw a second die. If the second die is the die that you named, then roll it. Draw a third die and roll that third die. Otherwise, place the second die in your used pile. And then on the double burst, instead, if you named the second die incorrectly, you just get to roll it. So I appreciate that they reworded this to make a lot more sense. And if we picture how this works with something like the spot, which amplifies those draw and roll mechanics, when you draw and roll one with Relaxing, you're also going to draw and roll one with the spots ability. Then if you name the second die correctly based on the Relaxing ability, when you roll that die, you're also going to draw and roll one with the spots ability, and then the third die that you draw and roll because of naming the second die correctly with Relaxing, you'll also draw and roll one with the spot. So you end up drawing and rolling 6 dice total if you can name that second die correctly. Or if you land the double burst, then you'll draw and roll 4. And if you miss naming the second die, then you'll only draw and roll 2. So on the upside, 6 total dice drawn and rolled for 4 energy with Relaxing plus the 2 that you used to get spot is good. On the downside, if you miss the naming there after the first 2 dice you roll, then you've paid 6 energy because of buying, Relaxing plus the spot to draw and roll 2. So because of that possible downside, Investigation is just simply better. A guaranteed 4 is better than a low roll of 2 and a high roll of 6 in my mind. Plus Investigation is 3 and not 4. So it's nice to have Relaxing back, but I don't think it makes the competitive cut. It's a lot more fun than something like Investigation because of that possibility of high rolling and rolling your entire bag based on one purchase of a 4-drop, but it's less consistent and so it won't see as much competitive play. Next up is Target Lock, which is a 3-cost basic action card that is a continuous action die, and it says place Target Lock on an opposing character card. It is still in the field zone, so it technically could be affected by stuff that, removes things from the field zone, removes like basic actions from the field zone. And it says each time your opponent draws that card's die during their clear and draw step, they send it to their used pile and you prep a die from your bag. And at the end of your opponent's clear and draw step, send Target Lock to your used pile. So if you're like me, when you read the first part of this card, you think, wow, this is like insanely powerful. And then you read that it goes away at the end of your opponent's clear and draw step and you think, oh, I only get to use this for 1 turn, this totally isn't worth it. Then you think about the fact that most actions actually usually only trigger once and then go away, and you could pull this out of the used pile after it's done being used with a Gadgeteer character and keep it cycling forever, and you realize that it's actually pretty good overall. So yeah, this is pretty good overall. Particularly good against things like Boom Boom and Yanti, where your opponent is drawing multiple Yantis, and so each time it goes to the used instead of getting to be rolled, and you prep dice. And it's also good against like Batiri Battle Stack and Doppelganger teams, because again, they're drawing a bunch of Batiri Battle Stacks and Doppelganger dice, and so you choose one of those 2 that you know they're going to draw. Plus, this could also just be used to like stop Fix-It from ever coming out. So it has some competitive possibilities. And the last card we're going to talk about is Thrown Brick. This is a 2-cost basic action that says deal 1 damage to target character die. If that character die is not KO'd, prep a die from your bag and add this die to your prep area instead of the used pile. Anyone remember Shocking Grasp? Well, this is like a better Shocking Grasp, period. With Shocking Grasp, you had to target something that would get KO'd in order to prep the action, often meaning that you'd KO one of your sidekicks to cycle this, meaning your sidekick plus the action would go into your prep area, similar to what you're getting here, except Thrown Brick just needs to hit something that won't die, which is literally everything with more than 1 health. Plus, if you can do that, then you prep a die and put this in prep as well, like I said, but this time you're prepping something that is likely better than a sidekick. So this is really good for a team like Boom Boom and Yanti because you can cycle it for turn after turn, getting the Attune trigger and the Boom Boom trigger with the action and a little bit of ramp as well. So I'd consider dropping Power Bolt for this almost immediately, or maybe dropping Investigate for this as this ramps a little bit too. Either way, it's going to be really good on a Boom Boom Yanti team. So there you have it. Those are all of the cards within the Harley Quinn team pack. So let's talk about whether or not you should buy 1 or or 2 of these. Right off the bat, I would say that the power level generally of this team pack is much lower than the power level of the Kree Invasion team pack, and from what I can tell, there's not a lot of characters that I actually want more than 2 dice for. Really, I'm only looking at maybe like one of those Harley's Hyenas because it's sort of an aggro card, and maybe the Poison Ivy Red I'd want 3 of, but as of the rest of that, I'm okay with 2. So in my opinion, I'm probably just going to pick up one of these. I don't see the need for 4 Poison Ivy Reds. I don't see the need for 4 Mommy's Babies Harley's Hyena, except maybe that one's worth the 4, but the rest of them are certainly fine being a 2 of, and some of them I don't think will see play, as I've mentioned, because I think the power level is lower on this overall compared to the Kree Invasion team pack. So in my opinion, I say buy one of these and be content. So what do you think about this team pack? Do you like these cards? Which one is your favorite? I think my favorite is either that very first Batman that I talked about because of the insane win con, maybe Poison Ivy Red, and maybe even one of the basic actions like Thrown Brick. Surprisingly, that might actually be my favorite card from this little set. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.